Jonathan Hayes was the kind of man most people only read about in glossy magazines. He was a millionaire CEO, running one of the most successful companies in the city. People saw him as confident, powerful, and untouchable. Whenever his name appeared in business news, it was usually followed by words like genius, visionary, or self-made success. But what no one really knew was that behind all the shiny headlines and expensive suits, Jonathan carried a loneliness he couldn't shake. Money had given him comfort, but it had also built walls around him. After his divorce, those walls grew even higher. He had 2 children, 6-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas, who were the brightest part of his life. They were his reason for smiling when everything else felt heavy. When he tucked them in at night, reading their favorite stories, he felt like the richest man in the world, not because of the wealth in his bank account, but because of the love in their small arms wrapped around him. Still, there was a part of his life that felt empty. He missed companionship, the kind that wasn't built on money, fame, or power. Too many women had shown interest in him only because of what he owned. They liked the luxury cars, the penthouse view, the designer gifts. But very few looked beyond those things to see Jonathan, the man who got up early to make his children pancakes, or the father who sometimes sat awake worrying if he was doing enough for them. One evening, while sitting in his office after a long day of meetings, Jonathan's closest friend, Mark, leaned against his desk with a mischievous grin. "You know what you need," Mark said. "A blind date." Jonathan laughed, shaking his head. "You're joking, right? I barely have time to sleep, let alone go on a blind date." "I'm serious," Mark insisted. "You've been alone for too long. You need someone who cares about you, not your money." "What's the worst that could happen?" Jonathan looked out of the tall glass window, the city lights glowing like stars below. Deep down, he knew Mark was right. He was tired of shallow conversations and people who treated him like a prize rather than a person. But then he thought of something daring. Something completely different. "What if," Jonathan began slowly, "what if I don't go as myself?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Jonathan leaned back in his chair, an idea forming in his mind. "What if I pretend to be, well, just a regular guy? No fancy suits, no expensive car. Just a single father trying to make it?" Mark stared at him, surprised. Then he chuckled. "You pretend to be broke? That's rich, pun intended." "I'm serious," Jonathan said with a small smile. "If someone is going to like me, I want it to be for who I am, not for the size of my bank account. If she can't handle me without the wealth, she doesn't deserve to be part of my life with it." It sounded crazy, but the more Jonathan thought about it, the more it made sense. For once, he wanted honesty. For once, he wanted to test if love could exist without money standing in the way. That night, after tucking Lily and Lucas into bed, Jonathan sat at the edge of the sofa, scrolling through the blind date app his friend had set up for him. His fingers hesitated over the screen. He felt nervous, almost like a teenager again. Eventually, he filled in the details, not about his real life as a CEO, but about the version of himself he wanted her to meet, a single dad who worked odd jobs to take care of his kids. When he finally put the phone down, he laughed softly to himself. "What am I doing?" he whispered. Yet a spark of excitement filled him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was stepping into something unknown. The following days moved quickly. His assistant arranged his pack schedule as usual, his company continued to thrive, and his employees saw him as the same powerful boss. But inside, Jonathan carried a secret. He had a date coming up, and she wouldn't be meeting the CEO Jonathan Hayes. She would be meeting the man behind the title, the father, the simple guy, the one who longed to be loved just as he was. He began preparing, though not in the way most men in his position would. Instead of tailored suits, he chose plain jeans and a simple shirt. Instead of his luxury car, he planned to take his old truck, the one he kept for practical errands. And instead of dining at the most expensive restaurant in town, he picked a small, cozy diner where he often took his kids after school. On the day of the blind date, Jonathan's twins clung to him with excitement. They didn't fully understand what a date was, but they loved the idea of going out with their dad. "Can we come, Daddy?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with hope. Jonathan hesitated. A blind date with his kids. That was certainly unusual. But then he thought, why not? If a woman couldn't accept him as a father with children, then she wasn't the right one anyway. Smiling, he nodded. "All right. But you two have to be on your best behavior." The twins cheered, rushing to put on their little jackets. Jonathan watched them with warmth in his heart. He knew that whoever entered his life would also be entering theirs, and he wouldn't want it any other way. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the city began to glow with evening lights, Jonathan loaded the twins into the truck. Driving to the diner, he felt a strange mixture of nerves and excitement. He wasn't going as the CEO with endless wealth. He was going as a man, just a man, with 2 kids and a heart that was ready to open again. Jonathan parked his old truck outside the little diner. The neon sign flickered gently, and through the windows, the warm yellow light spilled onto the sidewalk. It was the kind of place where the smell of pancakes and fresh coffee hung in the air even late in the evening. The twins were buzzing with excitement in the back seat, whispering and giggling as if they were part of a secret adventure. "All right, you two," Jonathan said softly, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. "Remember what we talked about? Good manners. No wild games at the table." "Yes, Daddy," Lily answered sweetly, her small hand clutching her brother's. Lucas, on the other hand, gave a mischievous grin. "But can I tell jokes?" Jonathan chuckled. "Only the nice ones." He took a deep breath before stepping out. For a moment, he questioned himself. Maybe it was a mistake bringing his children on a blind date. Maybe the woman would think he was careless. But then he reminded himself, this was who he was. A father first. If she couldn't accept that, then there was no reason to move forward. Inside, the diner was busy but comfortable, with families eating, teenagers sharing milkshakes, and an older couple quietly holding hands over their coffee cups. Jonathan spotted her right away. Emily. She sat at a corner booth, a book resting on the table as she waited. She had a soft, natural look, brown hair loosely tied back, no heavy makeup, and a gentle smile that appeared when she noticed him walking in. For the briefest moment, Jonathan froze. He had expected someone different, maybe someone glamorous, someone who looked like they belonged in the same circles he usually met. But Emily seemed real. Down to earth. Her presence felt calming, like she belonged in this little diner instead of a high-rise rooftop restaurant. He walked toward her, holding Lily's hand while Lucas walked close by. Emily's eyes widened slightly when she noticed the children, but instead of frowning, her smile grew warmer. "Hi," Jonathan said, a bit nervously. "You must be Emily." "Yes," she replied softly, closing her book and setting it aside. "And you're Jonathan." "Guilty," he said with a small laugh, sliding into the booth across from her. Lily quickly climbed beside him, while Lucas, bold as always, slid in next to Emily. "Hi. I'm Lucas," he announced proudly, offering his tiny hand. Emily laughed and shook it, as though she were meeting someone very important. "Well, hello, Lucas. Nice to meet you." "And I'm Lily," the little girl added shyly, leaning closer to her father. Emily's eyes sparkled. "You both have beautiful names." Jonathan's heart eased at the sight. There was no sign of annoyance or disappointment on Emily's face. Instead, she leaned toward the children as if she was genuinely happy to meet them. The waiter came by, dropping off menus, but Jonathan already knew what this place offered. Burgers, fries, pancakes, milkshakes. Nothing fancy, but comforting. While the twins debated over chocolate or vanilla milkshakes, Jonathan found himself watching Emily closely. She didn't look out of place. She wasn't glancing around like she wished she was somewhere better. She was here, fully present, smiling at the children's chatter. "So," she said, turning her gaze to him. "Tell me about yourself." Jonathan hesitated, carefully choosing his words. "Well, I'm a single dad. My days are mostly filled with work and my kids. Nothing too glamorous." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like a lot already. Raising kids isn't easy. But it's beautiful too." He noticed the way her eyes softened when she looked at Lily and Lucas, as if she respected his role as a father. For years, women had pretended to admire his parenting, but their real interest always circled back to his wealth. Yet Emily didn't even ask about money. She asked about his life, his kids, his daily routine. The children, as if sensing the comfort, jumped into the conversation. Lucas proudly told her about how he won a spelling bee at school, while Lily shyly whispered that she loved drawing princesses. Emily listened with genuine attention, asking questions and praising them. When the food arrived, something unexpected happened. Emily reached for the basket of fries in the middle of the table, and instead of keeping it to herself, she slid it toward the twins. "Here, you two should share these. Fries are always better when shared." Lily's face lit up as she grabbed one. "Thank you." Jonathan couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just what she did, it was the way she did it. Naturally. Without effort. She didn't act like she was being polite for his sake. She was simply being herself. As the evening went on, laughter filled the booth. Emily shared stories about her job as a schoolteacher. She spoke about her students, their funny questions, and the small joys of her work. Jonathan noticed how her eyes lit up when she talked about children. She wasn't just patient, she was passionate about guiding them, helping them learn and grow. And then it struck him. She was exactly the kind of woman he had been searching for, without even knowing it. Kind, genuine, grounded. But at the same time, a small fear tugged at him. She thought he was just a struggling dad. If she knew the truth that he was a millionaire CEO living in a mansion, would she treat him the same way? Would her warm smile still be the same, or would it change into the look he had seen so many times before, a look filled with expectations? He pushed the thought aside for now, choosing to focus on the moment. The twins had started a game of asking riddles, and Emily joined in without hesitation. They laughed loudly when her answers were silly, and Jonathan found himself laughing along, too genuine laughter, the kind he hadn't felt in years. Hours passed without him realizing. The diner slowly emptied, and the city outside grew quieter. At one point, Lucas yawned, resting his head on Emily's arm. She didn't pull away. Instead, she gently brushed his hair back, smiling softly. Jonathan's chest tightened. This was dangerous, dangerous in the most wonderful way. Because for the first time, he felt like this blind date wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the possibility of giving his children someone who truly cared. When it was time to leave, Emily helped Lily with her jacket and made sure Lucas didn't forget his toy car on the table. As they walked out, Jonathan caught her expression under the glowing diner sign. She didn't look disappointed by the simple evening. If anything, she looked content. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice warm. "I wasn't sure what to expect, but this was nice." Jonathan smiled, carrying a sleepy Lucas in his arms. "Thank you, Emily. I wasn't sure either, but I'm glad I came." For a moment, they stood there, the cool night air around them. Jonathan wanted to say more, but his words caught in his throat. Instead, he just nodded, letting the silence speak for him. As Emily waved goodbye and walked toward her car, Jonathan watched her carefully. Something inside him whispered that this night had changed more than he realized. And as he drove home with the twins dozing in the back seat, a new thought filled his heart. Maybe, just maybe, he had finally found someone who saw past the surface. The days after the diner meeting moved quickly, yet each moment left Jonathan with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Something inside him shifted, almost like a heavy weight had been lifted. Emily wasn't like anyone else he had met. She didn't ask questions about status, didn't act impressed by material things because she didn't even know about them. What she had seen was only Jonathan the father, Jonathan the simple man, and she had accepted him without hesitation. Their second meeting wasn't in a restaurant or cafe. Instead, Emily had suggested a small park near her neighborhood. "The kids will like it," she had said on the phone, her voice cheerful. Jonathan had agreed instantly. That Saturday morning, the twins practically bounced out of bed with excitement. Lily picked out her favorite pink dress, while Lucas stuffed his toy car collection into a small backpack. "Do you think Miss Emily will play with us?" he asked eagerly as Jonathan tied his shoelaces. Jonathan smiled, his heart warm. "I think she just might." When they arrived at the park, Emily was already there, sitting on a bench with a picnic basket beside her. She waved at them, her face glowing in the morning sunlight. The twins ran straight to her, greeting her like she was already part of their little family. "Good morning," Emily said brightly, standing up. She bent down to hug Lily and Lucas, who both clung to her as though they had known her forever. Jonathan watched from a short distance, amazed at how naturally she fit into their lives. The children tugged her toward the swings, and without hesitation, she followed. Jonathan joined them, pushing Lily gently while Emily pushed Lucas higher and higher, both of them laughing so loudly that other families nearby turned to smile at the joyful scene. Later, they sat on a blanket Emily had spread out under a tree. She unpacked sandwiches, fruit, and small cupcakes. "I made these last night," she explained. "I thought maybe the kids would like a little picnic." "They're perfect," Jonathan said, touched by the thoughtfulness. He noticed the small details: how she cut the sandwiches into shapes, how she remembered Lily loved strawberries and Lucas loved chocolate. She paid attention, something so rare in the world Jonathan lived in. The children ran off after lunch to play tag with other kids, leaving Jonathan and Emily sitting together in the shade. For a while, they simply watched, both smiling at the twins' laughter echoing through the park. "You're a wonderful father," Emily said suddenly. Jonathan turned to her, caught off guard. "You think so?" "I know so," she replied firmly. "The way they look at you, it's clear you're their whole world. That kind of love doesn't happen by accident. You give them your time, your attention. You can tell they feel safe with you." Her words warmed him more than any compliment about his business ever had. He looked at her carefully, curiosity building. "You sound like you know a lot about what children need." Emily lowered her gaze, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, I see it every day. My students, many of them don't get that kind of attention at home. Some parents are too busy, others just don't know how much it matters. Kids notice these things. They always do." Jonathan nodded, impressed not only by her kindness but also by her insight. "You must be a good teacher." She gave a small laugh. "I try. It's not always easy. But the little moments make it worth it. When a child finally understands a lesson, or when they run to you with a drawing, it feels like you've done something important. Even if no one else sees it." Jonathan found himself staring at her, realizing she was the complete opposite of the people he was used to. Most of the women he had dated loved grand gestures and luxury. Emily seemed content with simple joy: sandwiches in the park, laughter, and children's drawings. But then her expression shifted slightly, as though a memory had cast a shadow over her. She grew quiet, tracing her finger along the edge of the picnic basket. Jonathan noticed. "What is it?" he asked gently. Emily hesitated before speaking. "I'll be honest, Jonathan. I didn't want to come on this blind date at first. I almost cancelled." "Why?" She looked at him, her eyes soft but filled with something heavier. "Because of my past. I was in a relationship once, with someone who had, a lot money, influence, all of it. At first, I thought it didn't matter, but I soon realized it did to him. He looked down on me, treated me like I was small. Like I didn't belong in his world. It made me feel invisible." She paused, her voice low. "I promised myself I would never let that happen again. I don't want to be with someone who thinks money is everything." Jonathan's chest tightened. He forced his face to remain calm, but inside, a storm brewed. Her words cut deep not because they were harsh, but because they confirmed his biggest fear. If she ever discovered his truth, she might walk away without a second thought. "I'm sorry you went through that," Jonathan said softly. "No one deserves to be treated that way." Emily nodded, a faint smile appearing. "That's why I was surprised tonight. Meeting you, you don't act like that. You're just, you." Jonathan swallowed hard, guilt washing over him. She didn't know the full story. She didn't know the man sitting beside her was not just a single dad who worked hard, but a wealthy CEO with a life of privilege she couldn't imagine. And if she knew, would she still smile at him like this? The twins came running back, breathless and laughing, breaking the heavy silence. Emily jumped up to play another round of tag with them, leaving Jonathan sitting under the tree, lost in thought. As he watched her run with Lily and Lucas, his heart swelled and ached at the same time. She fit into their lives so effortlessly, so naturally. The way the children laughed with her, trusted her, it was as if she had been part of their family forever. But the fear gnawed at him. This connection was fragile, built on a foundation of half-truths. And Jonathan knew sooner or later, the truth about his life would come out. That evening, as they walked back to their cars, Lily reached for Emily's hand without hesitation. Emily held it, smiling down at the little girl as though she had been waiting for that moment. Lucas skipped ahead, waving his toy car in the air. Jonathan walked behind them, his heart torn. He had found something precious, someone genuine, someone who cared. But it was balanced on a secret that could ruin everything. When they reached the parking lot, Emily turned to him. "Thank you, Jonathan. Today was wonderful." "Thank you," he replied, his voice low but sincere. As she drove away, Jonathan leaned against his truck, closing his eyes for a moment. The kids were buckled inside, already chattering about when they would see Emily again. And Jonathan knew they would, because he couldn't stay away. But as he started the engine, a single thought lingered in his mind. How long could he keep this truth hidden before everything changed? The weeks that followed became a rhythm Jonathan secretly cherished. His days were filled with business meetings, conference calls, and decisions worth millions of dollars, but his evenings carried something far more valuable. They carried Emily. Sometimes it was a simple dinner at her place, where she cooked pasta while the twins colored at the table. Other times they met at the park or went for ice cream. Emily never asked for anything grand. She never hinted at expensive outings or gifts. She seemed happiest in the small, ordinary moments, watching the kids chase bubbles, or laughing when Jonathan lost a board game to Lucas. To the twins, Emily was no longer Miss Emily. She had quickly become Aunt Emily, the title slipping naturally from their lips one evening without any coaching. Jonathan had felt his heart stumble when he heard it. Emily had laughed softly, saying, "I'll take that as a compliment." But for Jonathan, it was more than that. It meant his children were letting her into their hearts. And yet, with every laugh, every smile, every late-night phone call with Emily, guilt grew heavier in Jonathan's chest. She saw him as a hard-working single dad, a man who lived a modest life. But the truth, the towering mansion, the polished cars, the empire he secretly ran remained hidden. One Friday evening, Jonathan had invited Emily over for pizza night at his home. He had planned carefully, making sure they met not at his mansion but at the smaller house he kept on the outskirts of the city. It was comfortable and simple, a place he sometimes used to escape the noise of his high-profile world. That night, he wanted Emily to feel he was exactly who she thought he was. The children were bubbling with excitement as they waited for her. Lily carefully placed napkins at the table, while Lucas arranged his toy cars into what he proudly called a parking lot beside Emily's chair. When the doorbell rang, the twins raced each other to open it. Emily stepped inside with her usual warm smile, carrying a bag of homemade brownies. "Brownies!" Lucas shouted, bouncing on his toes. "You spoil them," Jonathan teased lightly as he took the bag from her. "They deserve it," she said, winking at the children. Dinner was full of laughter and crumbs, the kind of chaos that only children could create. Emily didn't just tolerate it, she joined in, letting Lily smear sauce on her nose for fun and pretending to cry dramatically when Lucas beat her at a card game. Jonathan sat back, watching them, his heart aching with a mix of happiness and fear. It was after dinner, when the children were playing in the living room, that the truth nearly slipped out. Lucas, proud of his toy car collection, was lining them up for Emily to admire. "This one is my favorite," he said, holding up a shiny red model. "It looks just like Daddy's car at the big house." Jonathan froze, his smile faltering. Emily looked up, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "The big house," she repeated, glancing at Jonathan. Lucas nodded eagerly, completely unaware of the weight of his words. "Yeah. The castle house. It has so many stairs, and I can slide down the railing. Daddy says I'm not supposed to, but it's fun." Lily, ever the careful one, added softly, "It's huge. We play hide and seek and sometimes we can't even find each other." Jonathan's heart pounded. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice came out tight. "Kids and their imaginations," he said quickly, reaching to ruffle Lucas's hair. "They like to make things sound bigger than they are." But Emily wasn't laughing. She gave him a searching look, her smile fading just slightly. "A castle house," she repeated softly. Before Jonathan could answer, Lily tugged at Emily's sleeve, distracting her with a request to read a story. Emily agreed, but her expression remained thoughtful as she gathered the children onto her lap. That night, after Emily left, Jonathan sat on the couch long after the twins had fallen asleep. He felt the walls closing in. He couldn't keep this up forever. Every day he spent with her was another day he built a connection on a shaky foundation. And now the cracks were showing. The next time they met, the tension was there, subtle but undeniable. Emily was still kind, still attentive with the twins, but her eyes searched Jonathan more often, as if she was piecing together a puzzle. It came to a head one evening when they sat on a bench outside the children's school. The twins had just run inside for an after-school art class, leaving Jonathan and Emily alone. The cool air carried the faint scent of autumn leaves, but Jonathan barely noticed. His chest felt tight, knowing what was coming. "Jonathan," Emily said quietly, her voice steady. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said, trying to sound calm. "The kids keep talking about this big house. And Lucas mentioned a fancy car. I'm not accusing you of anything, but are you being completely honest with me?" Her words pierced straight through him. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He had prepared for this possibility in his mind, but now that it was real, fear made his throat dry. Emily's eyes softened when he didn't answer right away. "I don't need details if you're not ready. But please, Jonathan. I can handle a lot of things, But I can't handle dishonesty. I've been through that before. Jonathan looked at her, seeing not anger but hurt in her expression. She wasn't demanding explanations out of curiosity, she was asking for trust. He wanted to tell her everything right then. He wanted to confess about the mansion, the cars, the business empire that kept him awake at night. But fear held him back, fear that once she knew, she would walk away, lumping him into the same category as the man who had once belittled her. Instead, he forced a careful smile. "Emily, I promise I'm not trying to hide who I am. The kids, well, sometimes they exaggerate. I'll explain everything. Just, give me time." Emily nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "Time is fine. But I need you to know I don't care if you live in a small apartment or a big house. I just need honesty. That's all." Her words cut deeper than any sharp accusation. Because she wasn't asking for wealth. She was asking for truth. And Jonathan realized that was the one thing he hadn't given her yet. That night, when he dropped her off, the goodbye felt different. She hugged him, but it wasn't as light as before. There was a quiet question in her touch, a hesitation in her smile. Driving home, Jonathan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing. He had thought pretending to be ordinary was the safest way to protect his heart. But now he saw the irony. By hiding the truth, he wasn't protecting anything. He was risking everything. At home, Lily crawled onto his lap as he sat in the quiet living room. "Daddy," she whispered sleepily, "is Emily going to be our mommy someday?" Jonathan's throat tightened. He hugged her close, his heart aching with both love and fear. "I don't know, sweetheart," he whispered. "I hope so. But I have to be brave first." As Lily drifted to sleep in his arms, Jonathan stared out the window at the city lights. For years, money had given him power, comfort, control. But now, with Emily, it threatened to take away the one thing he wanted most. And deep down, he knew the truth couldn't stay hidden much longer. The days after Emily's quiet questions weighed heavily on Jonathan's heart. Everything between them still looked the same on the surface: smiles, laughter with the twins, simple evenings together, but beneath it, a tension grew. Emily hadn't pressed him again, but her silence carried more weight than words. She was waiting. And Jonathan knew he couldn't keep her waiting forever. One evening, Jonathan found himself in his office at the mansion. The massive glass windows stretched high, showing the city sparkling below. The house was quiet, the twins already asleep in their rooms. But Jonathan sat at his desk, staring at the framed photo of Lily and Lucas laughing on a carousel. His chest felt heavy. He had built an empire with courage and determination, but here he was afraid of telling the truth to a woman who had already stolen his heart. "Dad!" A small voice startled him. He turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her teddy bear dangling from her arm. "Sweetheart, why aren't you asleep?" Jonathan asked gently. She padded into the room and climbed onto his lap. "I dreamed about Aunt Emily," she whispered. "She was here in the big house. We were playing hide and seek. Do you think she'll come here someday?" Jonathan hugged her tightly, pressing his chin against her hair. "I hope so, Lily. I really do." But hope wasn't enough. If Emily was going to be part of their lives, she needed to know everything. And it was time Jonathan found the courage to tell her. The next day, he called Emily and asked if she could meet him, not at the small house, not at the park, but at his real home. There was silence on the line, then a quiet, cautious reply. "All right, Jonathan. I'll come." When she arrived that evening, her small car rolled into the long driveway, looking out of place against the polished stone of the grand house. She stepped out slowly, her eyes widening as she took in the sprawling mansion before her. For a long moment, she simply stood there, staring. Jonathan walked toward her, his heart pounding. Emily, he began softly, I need to explain. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. So this is the truth, she said quietly. Yes, Jonathan admitted, his voice low. This is my home. This is my life. I wasn't honest with you in the beginning, and I hate myself for it. They stepped inside, and the children ran to greet her, pulling her into hugs as though nothing had changed. Emily hugged them back, but her eyes never left Jonathan. He led her into the living room, where the soft glow of a fireplace flickered. He motioned for her to sit, but she remained standing, arms crossed gently, not angry, but guarded. Jonathan took a deep breath. Emily, when I signed up for that blind date, I didn't want someone who liked me for my money. I've been through that too many times. I've seen people look at me like I'm a prize, not a person. I was afraid. Afraid you'd see the cars, the house, the company, and walk away. So I let you meet the version of me that I wished I could be every day. Just a simple man, a dad with 2 kids. Emily's eyes softened, but her voice was steady. You should have trusted me enough to show me the truth. I know, he admitted quickly. And you're right. I should have. But I wasn't trying to test you or trick you. I was trying to protect myself, and the twins. They deserve someone real, someone who loves them, not what surrounds them. And I needed to know if you could be that person. The room grew quiet except for the soft crackle of the fire. Jonathan's heart pounded as he waited. Emily finally spoke. Do you know how it feels to hear this? I told you about my past. I told you how someone once made me feel small because of wealth. And all this time, you were hiding the very thing I was afraid of. It makes me wonder, did I fall for you, or for a story you created? Jonathan's throat tightened. He stepped closer, his voice breaking with sincerity. You didn't fall for a story, Emily. You fell for me, the man who makes silly pancakes in the morning, who loses board games to his kids, who listens to your stories about school and laughs at your bad riddles. That's me. The mansion, the cars, the business, that's part of my life, yes. But it's not who I am. The man you've spent time with, the man who can't stop thinking about you, that's the same man standing here now. Tears glistened in Emily's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. She turned slightly, looking toward the twins who were playing in the next room, unaware of the storm between the adults. I need time, she whispered. Jonathan nodded, his chest aching. Take all the time you need. Just, don't forget what we've already built. Emily left quietly that night. The house felt colder without her laughter, without the light she always carried with her. For the next few days, Jonathan moved through life like a shadow. He still worked, still cared for the twins, but every moment carried a dull ache. The twins noticed her absence quickly. Where's Aunt Emily? Lucas asked one night, his voice small. Jonathan swallowed hard. She needed a little time, buddy. But she loves you both very much. Lily frowned, hugging her teddy bear. I hope she comes back. Jonathan hugged them both, silently wishing the same. Then, 1 week later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Jonathan opened the door and froze. Emily stood there, her hands clasped together nervously, her eyes soft but determined. Emily, he breathed, his heart leaping. Can I come in? She asked quietly. Of course, he said quickly, stepping aside. She walked in, her gaze sweeping over the mansion once again. But this time, her expression wasn't one of shock, it was calm, as though she had made peace with what she saw. Jonathan waited, hardly daring to speak. Emily finally turned to him, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I thought about everything. About your lies, about my fears. And then I thought about Lily and Lucas, about the way they look at me, the way they laugh when we're together. And I thought about you. The truth is, I don't care about this house, Jonathan. I don't care about the cars or the company. I care about the man who carries his daughter when she's tired, the man who listens when I talk about my students, the man who wants to be loved for himself. That's the man I met. That's the man I want. Jonathan's breath caught. Are you sure? Because once you step into this life, it comes with challenges. Emily smiled faintly. Life has challenges no matter where you live. I'd rather face them with someone who's honest about who he is. Tears stung Jonathan's eyes, though he rarely let anyone see his emotions so clearly. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. Thank you, he whispered. I promise you, no more secrets. From this moment on, you'll have all of me. The truth, the flaws, everything. The twins came running into the room at that moment, squealing with joy when they saw her. Lucas jumped into her arms, while Lily wrapped herself around her waist. Emily laughed, hugging them close as though she had never left. Jonathan stood back for a moment, watching the scene with his heart swelling. For years, he had lived with riches that meant little. But now, watching Emily hold his children, he realized he had finally found the one treasure he had always longed for, a family complete. That night, as they sat together in the living room, Emily reading to the twins while Jonathan listened quietly, he knew the journey had been worth it. The lies, the fear, the struggle, it had all led to this moment. He had risked everything, and yet in the end, he had gained far more than wealth could ever buy. He had found love. Real love. And this time, he knew it was here to stay.